Hi there, welcome to Bates Wells's School Outreach Programme's webinar on an introduction to charity law. Bates Wells is a law firm. We do a lot of work for clients in the charity and social enterprise world, but we have a huge range of lawyers working for us, employment, corporate, charity lawyers, dispute resolution, public lawyers, immigration lawyers, a big range. But because we do a lot of work with charities, and because this is an area of the law which lots of people don't really know that much about, we thought this would be an interesting topic for us to cover. We've created this webinar because we're conscious that lots of the students that we would usually work with in our schools outreach programs to teach them about careers in law and what it's like to work as a lawyer are stuck at home because of the school's lockdowns. So we wanted this to be an opportunity for you to maybe learn about an area of law that you didn't know that much about before, to hear a bit more about what it's like having a career as a solicitor, so you can think about whether that career path is right for you. And it's got some tasks in it that you can try yourself. So we hope that this is an opportunity for you to push yourself, use your brain, and try and hone some of those key skills which lawyers really need. So the aims of today's session are to find out what sort of work charity solicitors actually do. And my name is Rachel, and I'm a charity and social enterprise solicitor at Bates Wells. So being a charity law solicitor is my day job. So you'll get to find a bit more about what that actually means. You'll learn about what an organisation actually needs to do in order to be a charity as a matter of law. A lot of people can think that a charity is any organisation which is doing something good, but it's a bit more complicated than that, and there's actually a specific legal test which you need to satisfy, and that's what we're really going to be focusing on in this webinar. Then there'll be the opportunity for you to carry out your own research into whether a specific organisation is eligible for charity status. And this is a chance for you to really experience what it's like to be a charity solicitor, because this is the sort of research task which I have to do a lot in my day job. So we've got some reading materials for you to go away and have a read of, and then we've got a particular scenario for you to think about and write up your answer to, and then we'll give you some pointers about what the correct answer would be, so you can really experience the sorts of skills which charity solicitors need to use. And then finally, in the hope that we have sparked some interest in you, we'll be taking a look at some links that you can use to find out more about this topic. So what do charity solicitors do? Well, a lot of our work is in setting up new charities. So often a group of people might have a great idea of how to change the world, make it a better place, and they want to set up a charity in order to bring that into fruition, and charity solicitors can really help them to know where to start. So first they'll have to set up some sort of legal entity. So that might mean setting up a company, or sometimes charities are structured as trusts, which are a bit more informal and don't have their own sort of separate legal personality in the same way that a company would. So we'll consider the options with them. And then most charities are required to register with the Charity Commission, and it's by registering with the Charity Commission that charities get their registered charity number, which you've probably seen if you've seen charities fundraising. So we'll help them fill out the application form that they need to send to the Charity Commission and help them engage in any correspondence with the Charity Commission. Then once charities are set up, there's still lots of work for charity lawyers, often around advising them on their relationships with other parties. So that might be other charities. Charities often work in collaboration together to do a project with a larger group of charities. So we might advise them on the different contracts that they'll need to have in place in order to do that. Or charities also often work with corporate for-profit organisations, particularly around fundraising. So you might have seen examples of things where if you buy a certain product, then they promise to donate 25p to a charity, and we would help with drafting the written agreements which sit behind those sorts of relationships. A big part of our work is on helping charities to amend their governing documents. So the governing documents are the rules which charities have to live by and make all of their decisions in accordance with. And their governing documents will also set out their charitable purpose. And a charity can only act in furtherance of its charitable purpose. So that's how you know that if you give £5 to a charity, which is set up in order to advance education, you as a donor want to be satisfied that that's what your £5 will be spent on. They can't just suddenly change their mind. So, but sometimes if a charity's purpose was set up a long time ago, it might become a bit out of date, and actually they might have a great idea of something new that they could do that would really help the people that use the charity, that's a bit outside of their purposes. And it is possible to change your purposes, but you need to go through a specific process. You need to get consent from a body called the Charity Commission. The Charity Commission is like the regulatory body which checks that charities are acting in the way that they're supposed to. It's sort of like almost the police for charities. So if you want to change your charity's purpose, you have to go to the Charity Commission and ask for their consent to do so. And charity solicitors will often get involved in helping with that process. And the Charity Commission, as part of its job at looking after charities, sets lots of guidance that charities have to comply with. This covers a huge range of topics. There are rules around the ways that charities are allowed to get involved in political activities. So a charity can only can't be set up purely to try and change the law. And so there's lots of guidance around what that means for what charities can and can't do. So that's one example. Another example would be that charities are required to make a serious incident report to the Charity Commission every time there's a serious incident within their charity. And we as charity solicitors would often get involved in helping charities with navigating that guidance. And there are rules around the ways in which charities and non-charities can work together so that the public doesn't get confused over whether they're dealing with a charity or a non-charity. And we give a lot of advice on that sort of issue. There's a huge heap of guidance, and at the end of this PowerPoint we've linked to where you can find that guidance online if you're interested in just having a scroll through to get a sense of the sorts of things which charities have to comply with. And then a final example of the sorts of things we do is that sometimes the Charity Commission might decide to launch some sort of formal investigation into a charity if there are any concerns that there might have been some sort of wrongdoing at that charity. And sometimes charity solicitors get involved in helping charities navigate that process. So the big question that we're going to be looking at in today's webinar is the question, what is a charity? So up on the screen in front of you, you've got a range of different organisations, and I just want you to take a moment to have a look at each of them, and if you've got a pen and paper next to you, just have a jot down which of these do you think are charities and which of these do you think aren't charities. I mentioned before that it's not a charity just because it's doing something good. You might want to pause the webinar for a second if you need time to jot your ideas down. I'm going to change the slide and reveal the answers in about 5 seconds. Okay, so let's have a look. So the British Heart Foundation is a charity, and there's loads of charities working in the health sector, like cancer research, Macmillan, there's loads of examples. So that's a charity. But as you can see, the NHS itself isn't a charity. The NHS is a publicly funded service. At the moment with the COVID-19 situation, some people sort of say that they're raising money for the NHS, but actually they're raising money for the NHS charities, which is a separate group of organisations which are charities, which then raise money in order to help things associated with the NHS. The National Theatre is a charity, and it is a charitable purpose to promote the arts, and so lots of theatres and galleries and museums are charities. And the Labour Party, which is a political party, isn't a charity, and none of the political parties are charities. So the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, the Green Party, none of those are charities. And I gave you a bit of a clue on that on the last slide when I said that charities can't, there's rules around charities not being able to further certain political activities. And there are lots of rules around charities not being party political, not sort of expressing a preference for particular political parties. And Girl Guiding is a charity, so are the Scouts, and there's lots of charities that work with young people. The University of Cambridge is a charity, as indeed are all universities in England and Wales, and they are automatically charities. They don't need to register with the Charity Commission. And then probably fairly obviously Chelsea Football Club and a hair salon are not charities. So I mentioned that it's a bit more complicated than just doing something good. So the actual legal test for being a charity is that you have to be established for purposes which are exclusively charitable under the law of England and Wales. And there are two things that you need to satisfy in order to demonstrate that you are established for charitable purposes. Firstly, you need to be established for one of the purposes which is set out as an example of a charitable purpose in statute. So the statute is Section 3 of the Charities Act 2011. And that's a long list of, well, there's 13 purposes on there that are regarded as charitable under the law of England and Wales. I've mentioned a couple of them. So I mentioned that charities that relieve sickness and advance health, that's a charitable purpose. And advancement of education is also a charitable purpose. And then the second thing that you need to do is you need to demonstrate that you are established for the public benefit. So we're going to look at both of those elements in a bit more detail. So the first thing that I'd like you to do is, in a second, I'd like you to pause the webinar and then make a list of what you think might be the 13 charitable purposes which exist in English and Welsh law. So I started you off with advancement of health and advancement of education, but see if you can complete the list. So I'm going to get you to pause the webinar and I'm going to reveal the list in about 5 seconds. Okay, so the list of charitable purposes as set out in Section 3 of the Charities Act 2011 are as followed. So, prevention or relief of poverty, advancement of education, advancement of religion, and advancement of health or the saving of lives. And those first four are the traditional heads of charity, and those predate the rest of the list. They're the very traditional, very well-established heads of charity. But as society has evolved and developed, lots of other purposes also became recognised as charities. So we've got advancement of citizenship or community development, advancement of arts, culture, heritage and science, advancement of amateur sport, advancement of human rights, conflict resolution, reconciliation, or the promotion of religious, racial harmony or equality and diversity, advancement of environmental protection or improvement, relief of those in need because of youth, age, ill health, disability, financial hardship or other disadvantage, advancement of animal welfare, and then promotion of the efficiency of the armed forces or the efficiency of the police, fire, rescue services or ambulance services. And then it's a bit of a cheat, but the 13th purpose is kind of a sweeper purpose, which means that as and when new charitable purposes come up, which are quite similar or a kind of extension of the existing charitable purposes, then the Charity Commission can also recognise those as charitable. So in that sense, charity law is always developing. And if you're interested in this, you can Google Charity Commission example charitable objects, and that gives you a long list of lots of different things which the Charity Commission think is charitable. So that gives you a sense of the kind of breadth of new things that have also been considered charitable. So yeah, have a think. Do any of these surprise you? Did you have anything else on your list which isn't on there? If so, it might be that it is charitable under the 13th head, and you might want to do a bit of research and see if you can find any examples of charities that have been registered with that purpose. There's underlying guidance to lots of these purposes. So, for example, advancement of religion, there's underlying charity commission guidance on what counts as a sort of charitable advancement of religion. The human rights object is one that there's a lot of guidance around, and is sometimes a bit of a tricky one. So it's not just enough to say that you're one of these. You might have to demonstrate other things as well in order to convince the Charity Commission that you should be registered as a charity. So that was the first limb of the test, whether you can fall within one of the charitable purposes. And then the second limb of the test was that you have to be for the public benefit. And there's two aspects to the public benefit test: the benefit aspect and the public aspect. So the benefit aspect means that the purpose has to be beneficial, and any harm that results from the purpose must not outweigh the benefit of the purpose. So it's quite common sense, really. The charity has to be doing more good for society than ill for society. And then the public aspect is about how wide the sort of people who can benefit from the charity are. So if I was to set up an organisation which was just to help my family, that wouldn't be charitable because that's very narrow. It has to be a sufficiently wide section of the public. And there's lots of different cases around what is considered to be a sufficiently wide section of the public. And at the end of the webinar, we've linked to lots more detailed guidance on this public benefit requirement if you're interested in the law around this topic. Okay, so now we are on to your research task. So this is your opportunity to have a go at being a charity law solicitor and think about the skills that, that you need. And some of the biggest skills that you need if you want to be a solicitor are reading and writing skills. So solicitors need to read lots of information, take it in, analyse it, and then apply it to the facts in front of them. And then we also, although we do meet with clients and speak to clients on the phone, we still give huge amounts of our advice in writing, either in email or in written advice notes. So being able to write clearly and have clarity of expression is incredibly important for anybody who wants a career as a solicitor. So this is a good opportunity for you to practice reading lots of information, pulling out the relevant bits, analysing the information that you're given and applying it to a set of facts to work out the legal position for your particular client, and then writing it down and practicing writing your advice in a clear way. So today's task for you to think about is to imagine that you are a charity solicitor and you have a client coming to visit you from the Temple of the Jedi Order who wants to find out whether the organisation could register as a charity. And this is very realistic. This is the sort of thing that I often have to do. So the first thing I would obviously do is find out about the organisation itself. So there's a link to the Temple of the Jedi Order's website. So that should be your first port of call to go on their website. And then before they visit, you're going to need to do some pre-reading in order to work out whether they could register as a charity. And the links on the screen are the things that I would suggest reading before you start your written work. So we've got the Charity Commission guidance on what makes a charity. And then I mentioned before that under Section 3 of the Charities Act 2011, the advancement of religion is a charitable purpose. But I'd also like you to go to the legislation itself, which is linked to here, and then look at Section 3.2 of the Charities Act 2011, because you'll find that actually the legislation then goes on to give a further definition of what counts as religion, and that's going to be really important to you working out whether the Temple of the Jedi Order could demonstrate that it is furthering the charitable purpose of advancement of religion. There might be other charitable purposes that you want to consider, but I would suggest definitely considering advancement of religion. As I mentioned, there's often Charity Commission underlying guidance, which gives more detail about the charitable purpose. And there is guidance, further guidance on advancement of religion. So there's a link to that guidance here. And then charity law doesn't exist in a bubble. It often draws on other legal judgments. And a really key judgment which touches on this question of what is a religion is a Supreme Court decision called Hodkin versus the Registrar General of Births, Deaths and Marriages. So it's nothing to do with charity law, but as part of the judgment, the judges commented on what constitutes a religion under English law. So and the Supreme Court is the highest court in England and Wales, so their decisions are binding on all other courts. So there's a link to the judgment here. You can read the whole thing if you're interested, but the relevant bit that I'd like you to look at is paragraph 57, in which the judge gives a definition of religion. So I'd like you to consider that when you're coming up with your answer. And then to give you the written task. So before the meeting, I'd like you to write some notes on whether you think that the Temple of the Jedi Order can register as a charity based on what you've read. And it might be that there are some things that make you think it can, and there are some things that make you think it can't. That is often the way in the law. There's kind of things on one side of the argument, things on the other, and then you have to balance them out. Now, a really good piece of written legal advice will set out the legal tests, and then it will apply the facts to the test. So the two key tests in working out whether an organisation is a charity is, does the organisation further a charitable purpose under Section 3 of the Charities Act 2011? And then does the organisation satisfy the public benefit requirement? The best answers won't just say yes, no, and leave it at that. These questions, although they seem like quite straightforward yes or no questions, have a huge depth of different elements to consider. So when you're thinking about whether it furthers a charitable purpose, well, which one? And if it's advancement of religion, well, what is a religion? Is it definitely a religion? What are the pros and cons of that argument? Is there any other purposes that you could consider? There's lots to sort of draw out, and the more detail in which you do your further reading, the more you'll be able to draw things out. And then, does it satisfy the public benefit requirement? Well, as we saw earlier, there are two limbs of the public benefit requirement, the benefit aspect and the public aspect. A great answer would draw both of those limbs out, and it would answer both of them separately. It's fine to do it as bullet points, obviously, but really try and push yourself to be thinking about, well, what is the legal test and how do the facts apply, so that you've got something nice and clear. So I'm going to ask you to pause the webinar and do the reading and then write up an answer. Obviously, you can rewind in the webinar if you want to look back at the reading material, and hopefully you should be able to click on the links in order to go and find those different sources. And then, I mean, it's up to you how long you take, but pause and come back whenever you're ready. So just as a reminder, so you don't spoil the task for yourself, don't let this webinar flick over till the next slide until you have finished your written answer. So I'm going to wait about 5 seconds just so nobody accidentally skips on to the next section because they haven't been able to click pause quick enough. Okay, so I set you the task of working out whether you thought the Temple of the Jedi Order was eligible for registration as a charity. And I asked you in particular to look at the two limbs of the test of whether it furthered a charitable purpose under Section 3 of the Charities Act, and secondly, whether the organisation satisfies the public benefit requirement. Well, this is a completely real case, and the Charity Commission considered an application for registration as a charity from the Temple of the Jedi Order in 2016. So rather than me attempt to write my own answer, your model answer to look at is to look at the Charity Commission's decision. So there's a summary of the decision, and then there's also the full decision, which I would really recommend you look at, because that's a good example of what I was talking about with what you should be aiming for with your legal writing, in terms of what's the legal test and then how do the facts apply to that test. And that decision really clearly breaks down what tests were they applying and then how do the facts apply. But to give you the headline before you go away and read those yourself, the Charity Commission did not register the Temple of the Jedi Order as a charity because it decided that it didn't further any charitable purposes. And the two charitable purposes that it considered were advancement of religion, and it found that it didn't advance religion because Jediism itself was not a religion. And it also considered the promotion of moral or ethical improvement, and it decided that it also didn't satisfy that charitable purpose. So because it couldn't satisfy any charitable purposes, it couldn't be registered as a charity. But like I say, I would really recommend going and looking at the full decision, and you'll see the range of different things that they considered, and then compare that against your answer to see how many of those things you picked up. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. I hope you found it useful. If you have developed a bit of an interest in charity law, then there are lots of different resources online that you could have a look at to find out a bit more. So there's a website called the Chambers Student Guide, which is a great resource for anybody who's thinking about a career in law. It talks about all the different practice areas in law. It tells you about the difference between being a solicitor and being a barrister. It talks about lots of different law firms where you might go on to want to apply for a job, and tells you what's different about each of the different law firms. So you might want to have a look at their guide to being a charity law solicitor, to read a bit more about what charity lawyers do. Or you might want to look at all the different practice areas and see what else is out there. The Charity Commission analysis on the law underpinning public benefit is a good read if you were interested in the law behind this question of what is a charity. So that's linked to there. And then there's also a link to all of the Charity Commission guidance on charities, so you can get a bit of a sense of the different sorts of rules that charities are expected to follow. There's an email address on the slide, outreach@bateswells.co.uk. That's monitored by those of us that are involved in Bates Wells' schools outreach work. We would really love to hear from you if you've watched this webinar and found it useful. So if you could drop us a line and let us know what you thought, that would be really great, so that we know that it's being used. And we're also really, really happy to help if you have any questions about how to become a solicitor, what it's like to be a solicitor, what the different practice areas do, what you should study at university, any top tips for becoming a lawyer, anything like that, please get in touch. It would be great to hear from you. I thought I would just finish with a couple of top tips if anyone is now thinking that they'd really like to be a charity lawyer. So the main thing, I think, if you want to be a charity lawyer in particular, is that you're going to have to really be able to demonstrate a passion for the charity sector. So doing some volunteering for charities is a great way in order to find out more about the sector and the sorts of issues that affect it, and just to demonstrate that you have that clear interest. And in particular, once you're a little bit older, maybe even once you're at university, one thing to think about is being a trustee of a charity. Charity trustees are the people who manage charities. They do it mainly as volunteers, but they make all of the key strategic decisions about what the charity does and how it's going to serve its beneficiaries and how it's going to use its resources. And that's a great way to get an insight into the charity world and how charity law impacts what charities do. So those would be great things to do if you are particularly interested in a career as a charity lawyer. So I really hope that was useful for you. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you soon. Thanks, bye.